season of Pentecost. Technically, Pentecost is going to last until November. I'm going to switch the themes up a little bit in between there and break it up a bit. It is a very long season. It's the season where the church does the work that Jesus called it to do. Up until now in the church year, from Advent until the end of Easter, we were really focusing on Jesus and what he taught. Now we're going to spend the rest of the year learning how to apply that. And what the church is doing. What it has done and what it's called to do. Now, I thought that for today, maybe because it's Anniversary Sunday, maybe I'd warm us up a little bit. I took some pictures from things around the church, and I want to see if people can recognize the church that we are celebrating today. So, does anyone know where this is from? You got the image there. I'm going to stand up here. Does anyone know where this is from? Hand up if you do. Banner? A banner, okay. No, I see someone shaking their head. In the stairwell, okay. I know it's because, you're right, it's a banner, it's a trim. And it's the time and talent board right by the entrance. And I know everyone's always focused on what's on the clipboards and whether they've signed up for something. You don't take time to notice the trim. Good on you. How about this one? One of the pots outside, okay. A planter. Again, I know you all are focused on putting the money in it. You don't take time to notice the turn around. It's okay, I get it. This one might be a little tricky. It's a banner, but do we know which one? I got everyone looking at the banner nearest to them. Oh, some people are seeing it. It's the loved one over there. Specifically, it's the middle of the oval. What about the hand? Oh, okay, yeah. Does anyone recognize who it might be? Whose hands those might be? No? Oh, close. Aha. We got Irene and Lorna. Their hands there. Okay, one last one. Now we all know what this is. Quilt for the 25th anniversary. And I know everyone looks at it every week as it's in the fellowship hall. As you're drinking your coffee, you take a quick look at it. Yep. And it's interesting that sometimes when we look at, especially those first ones when we were looking like really zoomed in, while everyone was still warming up, that stuff really zoomed in, and we kind of lose what it really is. And I think sometimes that happens when we're reading from the Bible. That a lot of the times, we're so focused on this little story that we're reading, we don't see where it fits in the whole story, the whole theme of the Bible. In our Acts reading today, Peter is continuing the sermon that he started last week. Remember, last week, the Spirit came down, everyone was speaking in tongues. People said, oh, they're drunk. Peter says, no, we're not drunk. It's too early to be drunk. What you're hearing was foretold in the book of Joel. So he's already nabbed a reference from the book of Joel. And now, he's going to go and talk some more. He's actually going to pull out 4 references from the Psalms in today's reading. Peter said, people of Israel, listen. God publicly endorsed Jesus the Nazarene by doing powerful miracles, wonders, signs through him, as you well know. But God knew what would happen, and his prearranged plan was carried out when Jesus was betrayed. With the help of lawless Gentiles, you nailed him to a cross and killed him. But God released him from the horrors of death and raised him back to life. For death could not keep him in its grip. Now there's some powerful testimony, but there's also a psalm reference. specifically from Psalm 18, talking about the resurrection and about the defeat of death. And you have to remember, Rome's power was centered in the fact that they had the biggest army. They had the best army. No one would mess with the Romans. Because if you did, well, they were just going to kill you. Except now here's Jesus come along saying, that's not the end. There's something even greater than that. It's really quite countercultural what Peter is saying here. Peter goes on and now he pulls a huge chunk out of Psalm 16. King David said this about him: I see that the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. No wonder my heart is glad, and my tongue shouts his praises. My body rests in hope. For you will not leave my soul among the dead, or allow your Holy One to rot in the grave. You have shown me the way of life, and you will fill me with the joy of your presence. Now here, King David is talking about God's faithfulness, knowing that God is not going to forget Israel, even in dark times, even in difficult times. And David, he sure had some dark and difficult times when Saul was chasing after him, the few times that he messed up as king. He had those times, but he knew that God was going to be faithful, that God wasn't going to leave David alone or forget David or let him just rot. God was going to raise him up from defeat. God still had use for David. Now at this point, Paul's going to make a couple of assumptions. He's going to assume that Peter's going to make a couple of assumptions, that David is a prophet. And that means that David has this really keen insight into patterns in the world. An ability to see things that just keep on happening because we're humans and we keep on doing the same things. We keep on making the same mistakes. David, as a prophet, sees that and he's able to write about it. And also that David is a patriarch. He's one of the people who helped to form the kingdom of Israel. And just like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, Israel, David is someone that if you are part of Israel's family, you need to listen to what he's saying. Peter says, dear brothers, think about this. You can be sure that the patriarch David wasn't referring to himself, for he died and was buried, and his tomb is still here among us. But he was a prophet, and he knew that God had promised with an oath that one of David's own descendants would sit on his throne. There's another piece of scripture that Peter is pulling into this first sermon that he's writing. And you have to remember, Peter is doing this kind of on the fly. He doesn't have the luxury of a week, and here's a set of readings, and here, preach on this, Peter. This is something that just seems to come to him. And he's talking here about God's faithfulness to Israel. That God isn't going to abandon Israel. Finally, Peter pulls a quote. For David himself never ascended into heaven, yet he said, from Psalm 110, the Lord said to my Lord, sit in the place of honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. Here, Peter is saying that David is saying that Jesus is his Lord. Jesus is the one to follow. So if as part of Israel, and you know God isn't going to abandon you, God is going to be faithful to you, but if as part of Israel, you are supposed to follow this David, David is following Jesus, Peter's saying, you've got to follow Jesus. Now this is some incredible reasoning to come up with kind of on the fly, and when you think about it, Peter, he doesn't have a great degree of learning, not scholastic learning. He doesn't have a master's degree in divinity. He doesn't have the benefit of tomes upon tomes or gigabytes upon gigabytes of other people's reflection on these texts and being able to glean from their wisdom. So where is Peter getting all this from? Where is he getting this from? On the fly. So two things. First off, even though he hasn't got formal scholarly training, Peter has been exposed to these scriptures since he was a little boy. He would have recited them. And in first century Palestine, there was a large degree of illiteracy. Most people could not read or write. So if you're going to learn something, you couldn't learn it by rote. You had to learn it by heart. You did that by reciting it over and over and over again until you had it memorized, like Peter did here. And of course, Peter, he was raised as a fisherman. And then he followed Jesus, going all over the place. When Jesus sent people out, Peter was probably one of the first ones who got sent out. So he had to do this all around everything else that he was doing. But the Spirit has come down on the apostles here. The Spirit has given them the ability to see the patterns that are happening in Scripture. Peter isn't claiming that David had access to some crystal ball and knew, okay, some 1,000 years from now, one of my descendants is going to be raised up. He's actually going to be the Son of God, and he's going to be raised up, he's going to be crucified and resurrected. David didn't have that. David didn't know all that, but he knew the patterns. He knew the things that would keep happening. And he knew at some point it would come to one of his lines sitting on the throne. Because the Spirit was giving him influence, giving him insight, just like the Spirit was giving Peter influence and insight. And all throughout this series that we're talking about this month, we're talking about how the Spirit interacts with us as we do these basic faith practices. And today, we're talking about reading Scripture. Because, we have to know what we believe. And the surest written record of that is through Scripture. And there's a lot of ways you can interpret Scripture. If you want to find justification for just about anything, you can find it in the Bible. If you want to find justification to be a mean person, it's there. If you want to find justification to discriminate, you can find it. But if you read it with the Spirit guiding you, the Spirit leading you on, then you'll find a love letter that's been written to us from God, written through prophets and apostles and people who have really known God well because they spent so much time in their presence, in God's presence. In our song of faith, we say that Scripture is our song for the journey, the living Word, passed on from generation to generation to guide and inspire that we might wrestle a holy revelation for our time and place from the human experiences and cultural assumptions of another era. God calls us to be doers of the Word and not hearers only. Scripture is passed down. And it's meant to give us life, to give us a revelation of how to live. And it's meant to be interpreted in our context. In 2023, and everything that's happening here. And sometimes we have to really read through Scripture to be able to pull it apart and see what that eternal message is. The good news is, if we read it with the Spirit, we'll get that. Because we go on to say in the Song of Faith, the Spirit breathes revelatory power into Scripture, bestowing upon it a unique and normative place in the life of the community. That with the Spirit, we learn how to read Scripture, how to apply it in our lives. And how that scripture passage is applied to my life might be a little different from how it's applied to your life, or how it's applied to your life, or how it's applied to your life. There might be little differences. But the base of it all is that it's still a love letter, written from God through prophets and apostles. So great, what do we do now? Well, one thing that we can do to get to know Scripture a little bit better, find a reading plan. Now, whether that reading plan is something that you create on your own, I'm just going to read through a chapter every day, okay? I'm going to warn you, when you get to Psalm 119, don't try and tackle that in a day. It's 2 or 3 pages in most Bibles. But you can find a plan. You can find a plan. We have daily bread reading plans that are available at the front door, and I think they're in the narthex, right? Yep. There are websites. One I can recommend is YouVersion. Through the Word is another one. Just ways that break down Scripture into manageable chunks so you can read it just a little bit each day. If you read just a little bit each day, you'll be amazed how much you pick up. Another thing you can do is find a good translation. For some people, that might mean reading from the King James Version with all the thee, thy, thous, words, words, whatevers. For some, it might be something a little bit more modern, like the New Revised Standard Version. The one that, if the United Church had an official preferred version, it would be the NRSV. It might be something like the New Living Translation, which we usually read for all ages time. I like that one because I find even the New Revised Standard Version, sometimes the wording awkward can be. If you know what's being said there, it's just no one would speak English that way. Or you might want to read from something like The Message, which is completely rewritten in the modern day vernacular. Just be sure you're sitting down when you read it, because sometimes you're going to read something and go, that got into the Bible? Trust me. And that's one I usually read for the kids, but sometimes I've got to go, whoa, I'm not saying that. When you read Scripture, I'd also recommend that you read through it a few times. First, look for a word or a phrase that sticks out, because that might be the Spirit just trying to hook you into something. It might not even seem like it's the main thrust of the passage, but it's that word or phrase that you're like, hey, is that really? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I really like that. Then read it through a few more times and try and get a feeling. And this is one problem that I have a lot of the times when we read Scripture. We read it with all of the passion of a bus stop announcement. Don't you find that? I mean, I go through my grocery list with more feeling than I go through Scripture. Ooh, steak. Chocolate cake. Ugh, strawberries. I mean, read Scripture. It's a love letter. And it might take a while. Sometimes it might seem really dry. But there's always some sort of emotion to be felt there. Take some time to get to feel it. And then finally, ask yourself, ask the Spirit, ask God, what is the message in here for me? In my place, in my time, in my context, whatever that context might be, what are you trying to say through Scripture to me? When it comes to sharing faith, you need to know what it is. And wrestling with Scripture is just one way that we can find out what our faith is, what it is that we really believe. I mean, it's great to say that I believe Jesus is the Son of God. It's even better to say what that means to you. And sometimes, reading Scripture can help you to get that, can help you to understand that, because Scripture is a love letter from God, written by God, through prophets, through apostles, written to us, to each one of us individually. And it might take some time to wrestle with it, to hear what God is saying, but I promise you, the faith that you will gain from it is entirely worth it. thanks for the Spirit which you have sent down on us so that we can hear the Scripture, so we can hear the love in your voice, so that we can hear the message that you have penned to each one of us through the ages. And we ask, God, that as we slowly start to read Scripture, that we might hear that voice, that we might hear that message, and that we might live it out into the world. We ask all of this